NineTen, NineTen, NineTen in the morning.
Yay.
Yo, what up, 910? We got Emily Crapo and the boys. Of course, JoJo on the far end down there. My guy, Micah Gutierrez here. And this week, we really want to dive into what does it look like that God has this left-hand kingdom and this right-hand kingdom. And we talked about this on Wednesday night of the grace gift of God is that he allows us to not just be citizens of where we find ourselves, right? Like for us, we would currently go, hey, I'm a citizen of the United States of America. And you go, fantastic. And there's all these cultural elements that come along with that. And he uses the play on our culture and our understanding of what citizenship means to raise awareness of what would it look like to be citizens of something bigger, something eternal, right? And he introduces this concept in the second part of Ephesians chapter 2. Paul starts writing about the unity that comes when we understand the gospel, right? It's by grace we have been saved. That now puts us all on the same playing field. Because whatever political, whatever geographic, whatever economic hostility existed beforehand, when we understand that it's by grace we have been saved and it's not of our own works, then we're all kind of on this equal playing field. And I love how Paul unpacks this concept of citizenship in heaven equals unity, and it draws our attention upward. And last Wednesday, we talked about the left-hand kingdom being both temporal, being egocentric, kind of it's about me, and lastly, that it was consumeristic. And we were asking the questions of the left-hand kingdom of what am I doing today that matters in 500 years, right? And then the egocentric aspect, how much of my day do I spend thinking about me? And then lastly, on the consumeristic aspect, how often do I walk into scenarios and go, what can I get out of this? On the other side of it, right, instead of temporal, it's eternal. Instead of egocentric, it's Christocentric. Instead of consumeristic, it's focused on serving. But really what I want to ask of you guys is, at what point was the veil lifted, if you will? At what point did you start realizing that there was more going on in this world than just the left-hand kingdom, right? It's almost like this Matrix-esque moment where you go, like, I'm awoken to the fact that my life has existed in the left-hand kingdom, and I was so painfully unaware of it. And I love that sometimes that awareness, it can be shocking, but it's also this gift, right? It's what I talked about on Wednesday night with the stick shift of, like, you get so used to driving crappy stick shift that it just kind of becomes normal. And you're like, well, this must be what it's like to drive stick shift, until it's fixed and it's how it's supposed to actually work. It's this machine that was designed to work a certain way. And what I thought was normal was broken. And as soon as it was fixed, it was like this, oh my goodness. And I think that's how a lot of our lives have gone, right? And it's why a lot of us sit here, and it's why we do ministries, because there was a moment in life where we thought, this is just normal. This is just how life is. Yeah. This is normal. This is the world. This is how you live it. This is what it's all about. And then we were, there was this awakening of going, what if there was more? What if there was eternal? What if there was Christocentric? What if there was this service-based aspect? And I'm curious for us, Em, I'd love to start with you, of what was that moment like for you of realizing that there was maybe more to life than what you had been living?
Yeah, I think for me I became a Christian when I was 16 and then went to Fiji when I was 18 right out of high school, and my world was completely rocked. I got to be in villages and hang out with kids all day that had literally nothing. And I think for me, I was just in such a white Christian bubble and had been raised in the church and just met the most amazing people in the world. But not until I went to Fiji and experienced poverty and experienced different races, different ethnicities, different cultures, that I really just was awakened to the fact my bubble is so small and the world is so big, and God's grace and love extends beyond not even just my town or my city, but America's borders. And it's for all people, and it's for people in the Fijian villages in the middle of the ocean where you don't think about them ever. Even for me, I go days on end without even thinking about Fiji. But like God thinks about those people all the time, and he has grace for them and he has grace for us. And so I think that for me was kind of the first time where I was like, whoa, like this world is huge, and like God's hand is over every single one of them, and he still looks at me and calls me child, and he still thinks I'm special no matter like how big or how many people there are. So that was like kind of my moment.
Yeah, that's rad. That's rad. I love how God's global kingdom can bring that perspective, you know, of when sometimes we exist in the borders of North County, San Diego. We just go like, this is the world, right? And you're like, Fiji, I think I saw it in a screensaver once, you know, and it's, you know, they have great water that's really expensive at gas stations, and that's pretty much all I know. And then you go and you experience poverty maybe in a way that you've never seen before, and you're like, well, I've seen, you know, poverty here in America, or I've seen, you know, homeless people, and it's like, for sure, like that's real and that's hard to see. And yet sometimes when we take in another culture, there's that moment where we start realizing the world is a lot bigger than we thought it was, and you start reading the Bible in a different way, going like like hostility in a way that I never understood what hostility meant. That's really cool. That's awesome. What about you guys? What was that awakening like for you?
I would say for me, like when you were talking on Wednesday and you made the statement of find someone who pursued their desire to the end and where are they at now, that's really when I was like awoken to this idea of a whole different part of the kingdom and the right side of the kingdom. I was somebody in again, 16 is when I like fell into Christianity. And so, and kind of got a glimpse or a taste of like the grace of the Lord. And for me, a lot of that was just pursuing all the things that I desired in high school, like girls, like making a lot of money. I made a lot of money during high school, like working different jobs and being really popular and stuff like that. And just pursuing those, thinking like, oh, I'm the cool guy on campus. Like there's all the girls want to talk to me. Like I have all the money in the world. I have the nicest clothes. And then it hit me at a point where it was like, I literally hated who I went to sleep with every night because it was myself. And I hated, like, there was no clothes in my closet, no money in my bank account, no girls that wanted to talk to me that were filling up this cup. My cup had gotten so big. And ironically enough, like, when I started really leaning into this community here and leaning into, like, this book right here, my cup became overflowed. And I just kept pouring and pouring. And it's that moment where in a season of, like, when us as young people or us as just humans, like, feel like, oh, my cup is so empty. And it's like, bro, you have an endless water supply right here for that cup for eternity. We just got to turn on the faucet and start filling it.
That's cool. Which I know I just gave you this, but I'm going to steal it back for just a second, because the tie between those two is really rad, right? Like there was moments for me growing up internationally and then continuing to travel as I worked for my dad, where you're with people like you were talking about of just extreme poverty who have nothing, and they seem way more joyful than I ever was. And I'm like, yo, I have way more than you do. Like I have way more clothes. I never worry about where my next meal is coming from. Like I'm not worried about those things. And yet seeing sometimes families that were just like, yeah, I boil water at night so that my kids fall asleep thinking that dinner is going to be made. And you're like, oh, like so heavy. And yet they're like, yeah, but like God is good. And like, I want to lean into this church community, and you're watching their cup be filled because they're not ignoring their life circumstance. It's not like, well, you know, I can ignore all this and God is good. It's like, no, in the midst of this, in spite of this, because I'm not focused on the temporal. I'm leaning into this eternal, and I have a God that no matter what my life looks like, it's by grace I have been saved through faith. Right? And they're like, man, the American church is so cool. Like, you guys are so awesome for coming over here. And I'm like, what? No, what? Like, what are you talking about? And I think those lessons are so important to learn of we have so much, and yet how quick are we to complain or grumble or go like, like I don't like this food. And it's like, bro, it's food. Like, you know, like when was the last time dinner wasn't put on the table? Or when was the last moment that we looked at our mom or our dad or grandma or grandpa or whoever puts dinner on the table and just went like, hey, like, thanks. Like, thanks for putting dinner on the table. And I think sometimes that perspective shifted from temporal to eternal can be this awakening moment. But sometimes it takes us getting out of our culture. It takes us seeing something outside of the normal. But I love that. What about you, Micah?
Yeah, I think for me, age 16 also was when I kind of had this light bulb. How did that work out for 16 for all of us?
Because it's 9-10, y'all.
And the boys. But like 16, I was here in 910. Like, backstory on me, like I grew up in a church that was my family went to North Coast, but just due to like some familial relationships in my life, I kind of viewed a lot of my relationships with a sense of egocentrism, feeling the pressure, feeling like I have to be the hero, which is what you talked about Wednesday. And rather than kind of this sense of pride and thinking I'm going to do it all and I'm going to succeed, it was sort of a sense of this shame of like, shoot, I can't be my own hero. And just reading scripture through that lens, like I just sort of felt a burden, like I wasn't able to do it. And like just with loving people around me in 9-10 and in 11-12 and through the Jordan, like I think not just like viewing the world through a Christocentric lens, but even reading like the very Bible that we read in a Christocentric lens. I even like think right now, we just sang the song Defender on Wednesday, where the first verse is saying like that Jesus has gone before we even knew that he went to fight our war, and he comes back with the head of our enemy and then calls it our victory. That's like giving this picture of David and Goliath, which is something that we often hear as, all right, you're the hero, you're the David, now slay your giant. When in actuality, we're the Israelite army who is scared and peeing their pants in a corner and can't do anything else. And here comes David conquering this giant that they can't conquer. And once the big giant's beaten, now they can go and get the riches that have been laid out for them. And I think like how much more has Jesus conquered our great giant of sin, and how much of an inheritance do we receive in Christ? And for me, like that just creates a whole other way of reading my Bible is not just a chore, and it's not just about what I can do. We've been using the definition of grace with our boys, calling it unmerited favor. Unmerited meaning it's not something that you worked for or earned for, and just this favor of God's inheritance. And like viewing it through that lens, like at that age, it just like created this whole new love and this whole new adoration for the Bible and for the gospel.
Yeah, that's cool. I have a question for you guys, and it's based on something I actually experienced today. We took Piper to the doctor to get her like 2-month vaccines today. Oh, it was horrible, guys. I would put this morning as one of the worst experiences of my life. I'd put it up there. And it's because we're sitting in the hospital, and they're like, okay, like they like weigh her, do all the just normal doctor stuff, whatever, and then they're like, okay, we're gonna give her vaccine shots now, and they're like, this is gonna be uncomfortable for her, there's gonna be a couple days where she might have a fever or just like bruising, whatever, because they're like giving a shot to a baby, and like babies are so small, and so like a tiny little vaccine shot can hurt them so much, and so she's sitting there, and I was just like, I don't like pain in general. Like I don't know how much you know about the Enneagram, but I'm a 7, and 7's like the biggest thing is like you flee from pain. And so like I'm always going like, how can we get past this moment, right? Like I want the next adventure, the next pleasure, whatever it is. And so there was already in me going in there going like, I don't like pain, first and foremost. Secondly, this is my baby girl. Like this is my little girl. Yep. And anything that has hurt Piper thus far, or anything that's like threatened to hurt Piper, like there's been moments in my car where like somebody else has done something stupid and I'm driving, I have Piper in the car, and there's been this like daddy bear coming out in me where I'm like, if you hurt my little girl, I will kill you. And there was this moment today where they gave her the shot, and Piper's like so mellow, like so chill, like really cries when she's like hungry or trying to poop. And she let out this cry that I haven't heard her cry before. And it was like this high pitched, and she started crying and like a tear streamed down her face. And I sat in my chair and I had tears flowing down my face. And I was just like, this is the worst moment of my life. Like this is watching her be in pain. Like I hated it. And Paige went and like picked her up and started comforting her, and she calmed down in Paige's arm, and she looked at me and she was like, you okay? And I was like, no. Like just, I hated it. I hated watching her go through pain. And it was this, just another lesson for me in parenting over the last 8 weeks, right? Like it's just, I'm brand new to it, but I feel like the last 8 weeks have taught me so stinking much about who God is and the way that he loves us. And I just imagine the left-hand kingdom and the right-hand kingdom, like how many times in my life have I pursued temporal things? Have I made life about myself, whether it was on social media, in a dating relationship, at work, right? Even in ministry, of going like, I like the attention, I like the credit, I like the whatever it is, right? Like it's so easy to make life about me. And when I read verses like Philippians chapter 2 that say like, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, I'm like, how?
Yeah.
How do I do nothing out of selfish ambition? Like I'm so selfish, and I make so much of life about me. But when I pursue temporal things, when I'm egocentric and when I'm consumeristic, I think about God. My love for Piper I said this a couple weeks ago. It's a drop in the bucket compared to God's love for me. Like it's the difference between like an eye drop and like a waterfall. Like there is no comparison to those two things. And if I sit in a doctor's chair crying because my little girl's in pain, I wonder the way God looks at me when I pursue the left-hand kingdom. Like I wonder if there's moments where he just goes like, what are you doing, man? Like what? Like this is hurting my heart to watch you choose something that isn't me. And I wonder if we can unpack this a little bit. Why do you think we do that? Why do you think we constantly pursue left-hand kingdom stuff when God has offered us the right-hand kingdom, and all of us are 20-somethings that still daily struggle with this? Like we choose temporal things. We make life about ourselves. We walk into situations with a consumeristic mentality, and yet we know that there's a right-hand kingdom it's offered to us. Why do you think we break God's heart all the time?
For me, it's easier, and it's hard to say. It's actually crazy. I was actually praying about this today, because I was thinking what you said last night about being egocentric is just so humbling for me, because that's me. Like, I think about myself all the time. I think about what people are thinking of me. I think about how I'm perceived. Like, it's a constant battle with myself of pride and selfish ambition, and just constantly pursuing things that I want, like even in like career, whatever that looks like how I'll be perceived is like the most important thing. But like, and sometimes it's easier because society makes it easy. Like I was thinking today about like just different social justice movements that have happened throughout our world the past couple months, and just like what's easy to believe because it's what the world believes, and that's what's cool, and that's what like will get you the most likes on Instagram, or like the most likes on TikTok, like whatever that looks like that's what we're going to pursue because we want to be seen as cool, we want to be seen as trendy, we want to be seen in like what's cool in the world. But long term, it's so harmful, and it's coming from someone that literally pursued every harmful act you can pursue in high school and college, and just never really, even like after becoming a Christian, like didn't do a great job of pursuing the Lord and pursuing the church and things like that. But it's so empty, and it's so just not fulfilling, like you were saying. Like it doesn't fill your cup, and so it may seem easy in the moment. It may seem easy in high school even, and like the next couple years, but long term, it's just gonna come up empty. It's gonna come up dry. It's not gonna fill you the way that you think it will. But that's just my thought.
Yeah, this is like so cheesy, but when you were talking about water, right? Jesus talks about living water when he's in John chapter 4 with the woman at the well, and he says like, I am living water. It's like the difference between like Dr. Pepper and water, or Diet Coke, like you said, you love Diet Coke, and water. Like whatever your soda of choice is that you like, and if you're like, I don't like soda, I run cross country, like good for you, right? Like you're ahead of the game. But like I love Dr. Pepper. It's like a guilty pleasure, but I know what soda does to me, and I know what it does to my body. But if I drink a glass of Dr. Pepper, I'm like, oh my gosh, so good. But then like the immediate result is dehydration, right? like soda literally dehydrates you. And so if you like came off of a sports field or whatever and like drank a Coke or drank a Dr. Pepper, you're like, so good. And then so bad, right? But it's like the result is minutes or hours or whatever it may be. And yet I think we live life like that so often, of going like, I'll just take this in now because it's good. It's good, right? Like you like drink Coke and you're like, oh my gosh, so good, so refreshing. Like a cold glass of Coke, like, you know, like the Mexican Cokes, so freaking good. But then if you only drank that, like your teeth would rot in like weeks, right? Like, have you ever seen those videos where they like rot it, where they take a nail and they drop it in Coke and it like dissolves? And it's like, if that sucker dissolves a nail, like what's that doing to me? And it's right there, right? We go immediately good with long-term horrible effects. And I wonder how many of us, we even know that something has long-term horrible effects, and we're like, but it's immediately good. Ugh, I hate that. But it's true. It's easier. It's easier.
Yeah, and I think even what you're saying, like, people tell me all the time that Diet Coke is bad for me, and I hear it probably once a week, and I'm like, I'm still gonna drink it, so sorry. But it's
you and
like,
my wife. You and my wife. A Diet
Paige,
Coke and
my
spicy
girl.
Cheetos. It's her combo.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
But it's so, I mean, it's so true. Like, it's not gonna fulfill long term, but it comes back to, like, we're so, in our society, it's do what's right in the moment, do what makes you happy, like, fulfill what, like, you want. But it's, like, that's, like, so against, like, what the Lord teaches. It's more about, like, the Lord wants what's best for you because he knows, and we doubt all the time, and we don't trust. But, like, why don't we trust the God that put every star in the sky, and he put every person that's ever been on this earth, and he knows exactly the way everything's going to go, but we're still like, no, but I know. Like, I know what I want. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Golly.
mind-boggling.
Just as we wrap up here, gentlemen, which one of those is hardest for you, right? Like, temporal, egocentric, consumeristic, like which one of those do you find yourself falling back into all the time? And knowing that God's looking at you with tears coming down his face going like, Jojo, like why? Like why do you keep doing this?
Yeah, for me, it's definitely temporary, like temporal aspect of it, and just building your house on sand or rock. And for me, like, again, going back to the cup thing, and even to speak on what you said, like, I tend to reference it a lot. Like, you have to make this 180 turn, right? When you're turning away from the left-hand kingdom to the right-hand kingdom. And if we do a 360, you're right back where you started. But I feel like we're making that 180 turn, and it's like really easy to turn that dial when you're like at camp or when you're here on Wednesday nights. And that cup, that community cup gets filled so quick. But it's almost like we need to like get a new cup, because when you're not at church, that old cup, that Diet Coke cup, that ex-girlfriend cup is still there, and so when you're like opening your spiritual cabinet and you see that cup there, and it's so much easier, like that cup's on the bottom shelf because you're so used to grabbing it, and that Jesus's cup is at the top, and you have to have that act of stretching up and grabbing it. Like, that was the hardest thing for me. All these temporary things are on that bottom shelf or sitting like right there. I can easily go and grab them when Micah's not holding me accountable, when I did something, like I sinned and I was guilty and didn't go to Austin, and when it's knowing that you as a follower in Christ are only going to push me the right direction. And so for me, that temporary aspect of the left-handed kingdom is like what had a grip on me for so long. And even to this day, I mean, there's certain things in my life where I'm like, you know, just things as small as like wanting to be successful in my career, wanting to make good money, trying to buy a home, like these things that consume my whole day. When, if you ask the question of in 500 years, is it going to matter what home you bought or what soda we drank? But no. But is it going to matter like how many times you open this book and talk to the Father? Yes. And like that's
right. Which it's an order thing, right? Because it's like there's nothing wrong with buying a house. There's nothing wrong with
100%.
being successful in your career, but it's which one you see it through.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, is your lens the temporal that then affects the way that you view the eternal, or is it the other way around?
Yeah.
Right. It's
100%.
like you first and foremost start with this eternal lens, and then when you see career, house, soda, like whatever it is, you're viewing it through a lens of what matters. Like, first things become first things. And I love that we have a God that can give us these good things if we can keep them good things and not make them God things, and go, I will take this gift and view it through your lens. And then if and when it's taken away, whether it's, you know, in 6 months because there's this huge economic downturn and I lose my house, or if it's in 60 years when I die or Jesus comes back and these temporary things burn, or do we go, cool? Because my gaze was always set on eternal things. It's which side of that you view it in. And I love that point of just going like, when the temporal things are easier to reach than the eternal things, my gaze is right here. And how do I daily lift my gaze up and go, it's like a switch. You wake up every morning and it's flipped temporal, and you're like, Like, gotta switch it eternal. It's like there is no fix. It has to be this daily walk, this daily reception of grace. And as, in our last couple of minutes, Senor Micah, who's dating Grace. It's kind of fun. By Grace. Dating Grace. What about for you? Which one of those is hardest for you?
Yeah, you can keep it.
No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, yeah. Funny enough, my sister's name is Grace also.
That's weird. You're dating your sister?
In a sense.
Whoa.
But
That's
my
a
sister
concern.
goes by
Does
my
she drink-
sister goes by Gracie.
Does she
so
drink
it
Diet
helps.
Coke?
But I think if I'm honest, and I think if we're all honest with ourselves, we ask ourselves, okay, is consumerism, egocentrism, or what was the other one? Or living for the temporary, which one do you struggle with? My answer is yes. Like even like for the sake of hitting all 3 points, I think on consumerism, talking about what I can get out of people versus what I can serve, like what I can give to other people, like working at a church, it's so easy to talk about like how I'm serving and how I'm doing, but I think for all of us there's this sense of leverage that we serve other people with, and thinking like, okay, I'm doing worship again this week, what do I get out of that in my service? And like you really get to the depth of all of our issues with all 3 of these things and more. We're gonna kind of stand short-sighted and kind of go, what does God think of me with this? Like I've gone back to the dirt again and again, and I'm eating mud pies when God offers this free like juicy ribeye. I'm sorry if you're vegetarian, but I'm using steak for the analogy. But like it harkens back to me this, just the story of the prodigal son, wherever that is in scripture, where the son has come to his senses and he goes back to the father and he's prepared his speech, and before he can even give it, here the father comes running and says like, before he can even talk, he says like, quick, put the ring on him, put the robe on him. He just clothes him and reinstates his sonship and the favor over him before he can even provide his father anything back. And it kind of leaves me, and it reminds me even now, like I'm still not too far gone with the areas that I fall short. And it's just like that daily reminder that like where my sin is so deep, and there's some days where like I just feel so in it, like his grace is even deeper. And it's just that what you talked about the first week, how grace enables us to live in freedom. And it's just like that, it's kind of kick of keep going. You're my son. Like you're not too far gone. And it's like, I still like, I have goosebumps just like thinking about it now. Just like the fact that, you know, we were talking about it earlier. Like if God's grace is like this new car that's free, that the insurance is completely covered for, like, and it's said, okay, you can have this car and you have insurance for it, but like if you crash it, it's still covered and you don't have to worry about it. You're not going to want to crash it, because like that's a gift that's been given for you to steward. And like, what if you hurt other people in the process? And I think the same way, it's this beautiful picture of God's grace that he freely gives to us, and that it's something that we don't just want to hoard or abuse like we also sung, but something that we want to steward for the sake of his kingdom.
Unless it's a minivan.
Okay.
Then you can
Austin.
just crash it.
Austin.
Right off the
Because
bridge.
Don't hate on
minivans-
minivans.
Buy a
Minivans can
4Runner,
hold a
kid.
lot.
Great storage.
Buy a 4Runner.
Great storage.
Good storage, vacuum, some have
Captain
fridges,
seats, pretty great. Not gonna lie.
TVs.
Oh, it's good. Hey, thank you guys. Thank you for your time and investment
you.
and your just honesty and vulnerability. 910's lucky to have you. We love you guys. We'll see you on not Wednesday night because that's Thanksgiving, but
Happy Thanksgiving.
December 2nd, Fireside Chats. Chew.